Hello everyone, welcome back to another Stitches and Scribbles video. My name is Erin, and today for our craft fair series we're going to be making a towel tamer, which will make a lot more sense at the end once you see what it actually looks like. For this project you're going to need a 22-pin knitting machine, and in addition to that a crochet hook and a stitch picker if your machine came with one. You're also going to need some scissors, a darning needle. You're going to need the cotton yarn of your choice. I'm using Lily Sugar and Cream in the color Hot Green. And you're also going to need some waste yarn. And this one is optional, but I find it makes it easier. I'm going to be using an I-cord machine to make the I-cords for the handles. You could hand knit your I-cords if you want to. This is just what I'm going to be using. Let's go ahead and jump in to our knitting machine. So you're going to start with your waste yarn. So cycle to the beginning of the row and cast on. And then we're just going to do 5 to 6 rows of this waste yarn. Alright, once you get back to your first pin and you have enough, we're going to trim that waste yarn, pop it off, and put it back in the middle. Then you're going to grab your actual yarn that you're making the towel tamer with, pull out a little bit so that it doesn't have too tight of a tension, and you're going to feed it through that first stitch. Leave a pretty long tail because we're going to need it to sew up the ends. Feed it back through, and then I'm going to zero my row counter, and we're going to do 30 rows of your main color yarn. So just make sure you do that first row nice and slow, and then you can really get going. So 30 rows of your cotton yarn. Once you have made it to 30 rows, we're going to trim our yarn and leave a nice long tail on this end too. And then we're going to go back to our waste yarn, reattach it, and do probably about 7 to 10 rows of the waste yarn. Once you've got about what you need, go ahead and trim your waste yarn and then just keep cranking until all of the loops fall off by themselves. Some of them might need a little bit of help depending on if they got stuck. Alright, so then when you're done you should have a piece that looks like this. You can kind of pull it tight to stretch out that tube. We're going to put this off to the side for now and go ahead and make our I-cords. So again, I'm using an I-cord machine. You don't have to do it this way if you don't want to. You could also probably just crochet the ends if you would like. But this is going to be the handles for our towel tamer. So I'm using my darning needle to thread my cotton through. I find the darning needle just helps weigh it down to get it through correctly. And then feed it through the weight at the bottom and remove your needle. To cast onto the I-cord machine, you're going to let it pick up one loop, skip over the second one, whoops, that one missed, let it get picked up by the third loop, skip over the fourth one, and then just start cranking. This can be a little tricky with thicker yarn, So you might have to give it a couple tries, but you're going to create I-cords that are 5 to 6 inches long and make 2 of them. Once you're done with that process, you should have 2 little I-cords that look like this. We're going to seal off the open ends. So I like to do this by taking my yarn needle and making sure that I sew through all 4 loops. It doesn't really matter what order you go in for sewing up the loops. I like to do the ones directly across from each other and then switch so that it's kind of like an X formation, but you can also just go around in a circle. It doesn't really matter. And then do the same with the other one. Like so. Now we're going to go back to our main piece and do some finishing on it so that we get our little tube shape sewn up. From either end, it doesn't matter which one you start with, you're going to thread the end of your main color yarn onto your darning needle. And we're going to do an invisible bind off so that it looks like we're just creating another row of knit stitches. So the way you do this is you go in the stitch right by your yarn and then out the stitch next to it. Then you kind of go across, you go in one stitch and out the one next to it. This is slightly different from how you do it if you're joining ends together. This time we're just sealing up one end. Then to continue, you go in the second stitch of the last pair that you picked up and out the one next to it. And then do the same on the other side. So in the one that you used before and out the one next to it. And this is going to create a little row of knit stitches to seal your end together. You could also just sew these closed if that's what you prefer. Does not matter, but I like doing this invisible sewing together. I don't actually know what this is called. And just keep going. This is also a lot easier to do if you pick a waste yarn that has high color contrast to the yarn that you're working on. So the white and the green is pretty high contrast, but if I had been working with like a yellow as my waste yarn, that probably wouldn't be the best idea. Going until you use up all of the loops. Like that. And then you're going to knot your yarn so it doesn't go anywhere and actually feed it right back through in between the layers of your tube, and then we don't have to weave in any ends. You can just pull it through, cut off the extra, and kind of squish it around until that end disappears. Then you can go ahead and remove your waste yarn from this side. Should be pretty easy since this was the cast off edge on mine. Mine appears to be getting a little bit stuck, so I'm just going to trim it off and pull out those last few stubborn pieces. This seems to always happen to me when I'm filming, but it's fine if I'm not. So I'm not quite sure why that happens, but that's okay. As long as you get the yarn off at the end, it's really not a big deal. Then you're going to do the same thing to the other side of your tube so that you have two joined ends. Once you're finished, you should have a little tube that looks like this. Now we're going to add our handles. So I'm going to thread the end of one of my I-cords onto my darning needle. And usually because of how the knitting machine makes stitches, there'll be a couple stitches with big enough gaps that you'll be able to get your I-cord all the way through your tube. So you want it just so that it goes in and comes out on the other side. Then you can remove the needle and tie the ends together with a really, really tight knot. And then you can trim your ends. And to hide this, we're going to then pull it back through so that the knot is inside of that knitted tube so that you can't see it. Sometimes this takes a little bit of finagling, but it should look like that. I'll show you again with the other side. Thread your yarn needle. You could do this part with a crochet hook too if you wanted. Find an open stitch on the edge. Pull it all the way through. Also make sure that you're not splitting a strand of yarn when you do this, because it will not pull through if you're splitting a strand of yarn. Alright, pulled through, tie that knot. Trim those ends. And then hide the knot back inside your tube. And that is your towel tamer. So what you do with these is you fold them over like an oven handle or a towel bar or anything like that. Pull your little hand towel through these two loops and it just keeps it securely on whatever handle you're using to hold it. I price these at, I think it's 10, I can't remember if I priced these at $10 or $15 for my craft fair shows. I think I put them at $15 just because there's a little more work that goes into them. And that puts them, oh no, maybe I did do them as 10 because I think I charged 10 for my soap savers. But either price would probably be doable. I have gotten the response from people that they like these because a lot of times if you see crocheted or knitted towel toppers, they're attached to the actual towel, like sewn in. And people said that they liked these because you could swap out the towel and not have to worry about the handle going through the wash and potentially ruining it. It's cotton yarn, so it should be pretty durable if you did want to wash it. But that's the response that I have gotten from these. If I'm really cranking them out on that knitting machine, I can probably make 4 to 5 of these in an hour. So $10 for each one is a pretty good price for something like this. But it just adds a cute pop of color and some functionality to plain dish towels. Thank you so much for watching this tutorial. If you want to check me out on other forms of social media, make sure you check the description box below to see where else I am. If you liked this video and want to see some more crafty content, make sure you hit that subscribe button so that you get notifications of all of my uploads. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye everyone!